joining us. Yes, just for everyone's knowledge, we're recording the webinar. Just want to thank you for coming out and sharing your time with us. I'm Rebecca Milner, International Medical Corps' Chief Advancement Officer. As you know, International Medical Corps is a global first responder to war, disaster, and disease outbreaks around the world. And we really couldn't do our we really couldn't do our work without supporters like you. So thank you so much. I know a lot of you on the call are longtime supporters, and I think we have a few new people to International Medical Corps. So for you, welcome. We're glad everyone had a chance to join us. In a few minutes, today, we'll be hearing from our plan giving experts about ways that you can plan for your future and the type of legacy that you hope to secure. But first, I wanted to share a few program updates and a quick housekeeping note. We'll have some time for questions at the end of this presentation. So if you have any, please feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can or follow up with you individually after the program. But today I'd like to kind of kick off our time together by giving you an update and an overview of International Medical Corps' current work. And I mean, I'm sure you've all felt it, but we felt it too. The number of global disasters in recent years has really been increasing. Natural disasters are increasing in size and severity, and insecurity and conflict still grip many nations. And as a global community, we continue to battle the COVID-19 pandemic, along with other outbreaks. But because of your support and commitment in 2020, International Medical Corps reached more than 18 million people in the United States and in 30 countries that we work in that are affected by conflict, natural disaster, and disease. As everybody is well aware, the pandemic has been a major challenge for all of us and for International Medical Corps too. Our number one priority throughout the pandemic has been really to keep our staff and the people that we serve safe while maintaining our health services and training. And as you can see, we were able to do that by continuing our primary healthcare services, our maternal and children health services, routine immunizations, nutrition services, mental health support, protection services, and much, much more. But as we provide these services in the community, training, of course, underpins everything that we do. And we're really all about ensuring that communities have the knowledge and skills that they need to take care of themselves. And COVID is a great example of our work. You know, it's been a whole of agency response to the pandemic. Every aspect of our organization really had to pivot and make sure that we were able to keep our staff and the people that we serve safe while continuing our programs. And our strategy really kind of focused on ensuring the safety of those frontline service providers by distributing personal protective equipment and ensuring that health facilities had infection prevention and control measures in place. And as you can see here, we distributed more than 24 million pieces of personal protective equipment and many, many thousands more other kind of intensive care equipment and supplies. Training and education was key to our response. We trained health providers and communities about COVID and how to prevent the spread, and supported health facilities as they were really kind of inundated and overwhelmed by the number of COVID patients, really supporting their ability and expanding their ability to meet those incredible needs. And then as vaccinations have come online, in particular in the US and in countries where we work, we're supporting the rollout of vaccine campaigns. And those activities kind of include, they run the gamut. They include providing cold chain equipment to keep vaccines at proper temperatures, transportation services to ensure that vaccines get where they're needed, helping ministries of health and local communities design and implement their vaccine campaigns, educating communities on the safety and efficacy of vaccines, and working to overcome hesitancy, which is something that we face here in the US, and it's true in all of the countries that we work. And then just generally really prioritizing, marginalized and under-resourced community and making sure that they have access to the vaccine. I mean, a good example of that is our work in Jordan, where we're working with the Ministry of Health and UNHCR to ensure that Syrian refugees can get the vaccine. So we're promoting the opportunity to get vaccinated in refugee camps. We're helping sign up refugees to get an appointment, providing transportation, and teams are also kind of administering vaccines as well. So our support runs the gamut, and we're doing whatever we can to support ministries of health as they embark on this massive effort. I mean, as there's more than 7 billion people in the world, and we need the World Health Organization has a goal to vaccinate 2 billion people by the end of 2022. So there's a lot of work to be done, and we're really trying to support that goal and really focus on making sure that marginalized communities have access to those services and those vaccines, because we know, we here in the United States, we won't be safe from the variants of COVID-19 until everyone is safe. So we'll continue to do that. But in the United States, International Medical Corps has also been really active on the front lines of combating COVID. And our response has really been around partnering with hospitals, clinics, and nursing homes in more than 34 cities in 9 states. That includes Alabama, California, Florida, Illinois, Massachusetts, Michigan, New York, Puerto Rico, South Carolina, and Texas. And really, International Medical Corps' strategy was to support existing community-based hospitals that were overwhelmed, hospitals and nursing homes that were overwhelmed by the COVID pandemic. And we really had 3 components to our work. Was really about increasing space so that people could care for more people, supplies and equipment, and that includes the vital PPE, the shortages that we were experiencing in early 2020, and also intensive care equipment like monitors and pulse oximeters and all of those things that really help the existing facilities expand their capacity to serve more people. And then we also provided surge support in staffing. So we deployed doctors and nurses across the country to help these overwhelmed hospitals deal with the large number of COVID positive patients. And we're really proud of our response. Couldn't have done it without supporters like you. But we have done that. We continue to do that. And then we're also supporting vaccination efforts throughout the United States as well. We've had teams of vaccinators in Los Angeles and Texas and Puerto Rico, helping deliver those shots in arms, which is really, really important. And as I said, really important on our path to stop the pandemic and really make sure that we're all safe. And we don't always respond in the United States, but the size and the scale of the COVID pandemic in the US clearly was overwhelming, the greatest health system in the world, right? So we've identified these significant gaps at these sort of smaller hospitals around the country that needed the support that we could offer. And so that's always International Medical Corps' approach, really trying to fill those gaps, add value, see where we can provide assistance and support, and really also provide training where needed too. So, I mean, we're really proud of our response here in the United States, and we're going to keep up the efforts here while we are continuing to work in the 30 other countries where we have programs. You know, and just wanted to share a couple updates on some of our recent responses. I'm sure everybody's been, you know, reading and seeing the news and the situation in Afghanistan. And conditions are really tough in Afghanistan. The situation on the ground is evolving day by day. Many Afghans have fled their homes due to the collapse of the government. They've left their lands and their livelihoods behind to seek safety, predominantly in the major cities. But overall in Afghanistan, more than 18 million people, a number that equals about half the overall population of the country, need humanitarian assistance right now. And of those 18 million people, 10 million are children. I mean, so there's significant need in Afghanistan. 1/3 of them are food insecure, and more than half of all the children under 5 are at risk of acute malnutrition. And so it's really important for people. I mean, I know that there's been a lot of discussion about the political situation there and evacuating people that you know are seeking asylum, but you know we remain committed to helping in the communities in which we're working. I'm sure many of you know that International Medical Corps' sort of founding effort was in Afghanistan. We were established in 1984 to address the critical need for medical care in Afghanistan during the Soviet occupation, and we've been in Afghanistan ever since then. And you know we have about 450 Afghan colleagues in country. You know, given the insecurity sweeping the country, I mean, our number one priority is the safety of our staff there. Our program teams and our security teams are working kind of hand in hand daily to make real-time decisions about whether we can operate our programs and how we can deliver our services. I mean, right now we are able to operate in the 14 provinces that we have programs. So we're providing health services, primary health care, maternal care, ensuring that children have access to medical care. And, we're even carefully expanding our work. We just stood up 5 mobile medical teams in the Kabul area that are providing support to the people who have been displaced by the insecurity that is sweeping the nation. So we remain really concerned about what the winter is going to bring. A lot of people are unsheltered, don't have access to food. The banking system has essentially been kind of ground to a halt. People can't access money, but we're really trying to adapt through those challenges and remain committed to stay and provide the life-saving services that we can. So we think that our ability to operate is really due to our longstanding presence in the country and our deep ties into the community. And so community leaders really want us to stay and continue to operate these services. And so we will do so for as long as we can and for as long as we can keep our staff and our frontline health professionals safe. So while the news from Afghanistan is grim, we do remain hopeful that we'll be able to continue to meet those really urgent humanitarian needs for the people of Afghanistan. And then on the other side of the world, I know everyone last month heard about the earthquake that hit Haiti. It was August 14th, when a 7.2 magnitude earthquake struck the Tiburon Peninsula in Haiti, which was about 90 miles west of the capital of Port-au-Prince. Numbers were pretty staggering. I mean, more than 2,200 people died, more than 12,000 people were injured, and 130,000 plus buildings collapsed. and were destroyed or damaged. It was really shook Haiti. I mean, it's the worst natural disaster to hit since the 2010 earthquake. And then to add insult to injury, on the heels of the earthquake, the tropical storm kind of swept through and just made life that much more miserable. It was really, lots of people are unsheltered, and current estimates are that there are about 650,000 people in need of immediate humanitarian assistance. After the earthquake struck, the Haitian government and the World Health Organization turned to International Medical Corps to deploy its emergency field hospital to help respond to the tremendous needs there. International Medical Corps is the only non-governmental organization in the world that is classified by WHO as an emergency medical team, type 1 fixed and mobile healthcare provider. Now, that's a lot of humanitarian jargon, but what that means is that International Medical Corps has this mobile facility, and we have the ability to deploy it anywhere in the world, the facility and the associated staff, in response to a disaster within 72 hours. And so at the request of the Haitian government, we deployed in partnership with our corporate supporter FedEx that airlifted the facility into Port-au-Prince. And then we deployed it to Akin, which is a more rural area outside the capital. And while this was our first official deployment of the field hospital, we're up and running. Our hospital is treating anywhere from 100 to 130 patients a day. We are still seeing injuries from the earthquake, but also seeing a real demand for general services, general health services. So we've been seeing a lot of people that need treatment for heart disease, diabetes, pregnant women that need care, children that are malnourished, all the kinds of healthcare that we take for granted that really doesn't exist in Akin. And so, we are committed to providing those services and remaining for as long as we need. That's a kind of a quick roundup of some of the challenges that we've been facing and addressing, but our 7,500 team members around the world continue to operate in some of the most difficult and toughest environments where the needs are the greatest. And this includes, Syria, Yemen, Ethiopia, South Sudan, to name just a few of the countries in which we operate. But we couldn't do our work without generous supporters like you. And we really appreciate your commitment to International Medical Corps. And we hope that you will continue to keep us on your list of charitable priorities. And one way to do that is through a legacy or planned gift, which is the purpose of our session today. And a planned gift is a charitable donation to an organization that you care about that's arranged today in the present, but will be realized at some time in the future. It can be a gift made by everyone at any age. It's not just for people in the latter stages of life. And whether by cash, stock, donor advised fund, property, or other asset, these gifts can be part of a will, a trust, a retirement plan, insurance policy. It's very, there are lots of options, and we have two incredible plan giving experts here today to kind of walk us through what a planned gift is, and how you can kind of make one. So I'm delighted to introduce our panelists. Esther Hopkins is the head of her own firm that focuses on estate and business planning. Esther received her Juris Doctor from Loyola Law School. And we're also joined by William Strickland, who's a plan giving officer at the California Community Foundation, and he received his JD from the University of California, Davis. So let me start with you, Esther. Why would someone need to set up an estate plan, and what are the elements that should be included in that?
Thank you, Rebecca. Welcome, everybody. So I want to get a couple of misconceptions about estate planning out of the way for sure. I hear it all the time. Well, I don't need an estate plan. I'm too young. That's, for later in life. Or, an estate plan is death planning. An estate plan is much, much more than that. It is getting things in order so that if something happens to you, you are protecting yourself, you're protecting your loved ones, your assets. You are putting a plan forth to continue your charitable intent, to ensure that your values continue in your plan. And that's really what an estate plan is. A big high level look at it. Everyone who's 18 and over needs an estate plan. That doesn't mean that every 18-year-old is going to need some elaborate trust or even a will for that matter. But as we go through this, you're going to see that an estate plan really is an important part of making sure that you guys are protected and that what you are doing in your life continues, whether you're incapacitated or after date of death. So I like to use this chart because it really helps to illuminate, how things play out. On the left-hand side, from the top to the bottom, you can see all the things that will happen when you don't have an estate plan. And on the right-hand side, you can see that that's the course that, the path that you will follow if you have documents in place and have an estate plan. And if you see in the middle row, that's the things that'll happen if you're incapacitated. And the bottom row are all the things that will happen post-death. On the right-hand side, for example, it's the things that'll happen when post-death if you don't have an estate plan. And on the right, it's if you have an estate plan. So I'm going to start off on this diagram, focusing on the upper right-hand corner, showing how if you don't have an estate plan, upper left-hand corner, as if you don't have an estate plan. So if you're in that zone, and I think that's where people fall into a comfort of everything's working fine because I can make my own financial decisions. I can make my own personal care, life and death, and medical decisions. I don't need a bunch of documents in order to do that as long as I stay in that zone. I can make charitable gifts. I can take actions to put forth my values and live in a certain way. And everything works just fine. And that's a false sense of comfort in that zone, because if you fall below that first line and you fall into the incapacity zone, if you're incapacitated, there isn't a single person out there who legally has the right to make financial, personal care, life and death, and medical decisions for you. And the court is the entity that's now going to have the authority to do that for you. So if you're incapacitated and you do not have an estate plan, somebody has to go and apply to the court to be appointed the conservator of your estate to manage your finances, and the conservator of your person to make personal care, life and death, and medical decisions for you. And the court's going to continue to have jurisdiction over you the entirety of your incapacity. So if you have Alzheimer's, for example, the court's going to be in charge of you for the duration of your life, because that is unfortunately, that's a terminal illness, and you're going to have the court basically intervening in all of your matters. And we don't want that. The court gets to decide who's in charge. It's extremely expensive. Your assets are tied up in the court. And the court's sole focus in a conservatorship process is using those assets to take care of you only. Now, that is obviously very, very important. But if your wishes were to continue to do charitable gifts or gifts to others that you care about during that time frame, that's not going to happen. Those will end during that time frame. All that charitable giving that you were doing, or all of that, care that you were giving to your loved ones, terminates automatically. The court's not going to allow it. So we want to stay out of that conservatorship process. I do want to make one comment. I am a California lawyer, and a lot of what I'm saying does apply, throughout the country, but there might be some tweaks. But I just want to give that little, caveat on my analysis. A lot of these things apply in other states as well, but you would definitely need to check in with a local attorney and see if these are indeed the things that you will need in your state. But how do we avoid conservatorship? And I can tell you for most states that the way you're going to avoid that is in the upper right-hand corner. You're going to draft some documents, and you can see that we have a trust, a durable power of attorney. AHCD stands for Advanced Healthcare Directive. In other states, they're, may be called a living will. You may need a HIPAA waiver and a will. Those are tools that we use for an estate plan. Some of the tools that we have in our toolbox to create an estate plan. Doesn't mean you're going to need all of those, but those are just some of the most basic tools that get used as part of an estate plan. And the three basic tools that we use, the most important ones that we use, and this is across the board in every state, to keep us out of conservatorship. By the way, in some states, it's called guardianship, just FYI. We use that durable power of attorney, that healthcare directive, and that HIPAA waiver in order to keep us out of conservatorship. So what's the durable power of attorney? It is a document where we appoint an agent to make financial decisions for us once we are deemed incapacitated. So you create it while you have capacity. If you are deemed incapacitated and fall below that line, now the agent has power and they can handle your finances. And now your finances are kept out of that conservatorship guardianship proceeding. Every 18-year-old needs that document, okay? What is the Advanced Healthcare Directive? It's a similar document. You also draft it while you have capacity. And you again appoint an agent who's going to make decisions for you if you were to become incapacitated. But these decisions will be not financial, it'll be medical care, life and death, and personal care decisions. Again, we draft it up there. Your agent's power does not kick in until you're deemed incapacitated. And now those personal care, life and death, and medical decisions are kept out of the court process. Super important so that we never have to be in that process. While we think of estate planning as death planning, let me tell you, incapacity planning is just as important. It's very important to make sure that we take care of those documents immediately. My children turned 18. Those were the first things I did, because even as their mother, I have zero rights to step in and handle those things for them. So if you do nothing else, make sure you do that. And then the HIPAA waiver, well, the HIPAA laws say that, our medical providers are not allowed to give out medical information, our medical information, without our permission. So we draft a HIPAA waiver that grants those two agents, as well as our trustee, if you have a trust, the power to access our medical records if we were to become incapacitated. So those three documents kick in if we're incapacitated and we stay out of conservatorship. So that's a big primary purpose. But those documents can be drafted also in a way, if we are charitably inclined, like I said earlier, if you're in a conservatorship, all of that giving that you were doing, you're just not going to be able to do that. But a properly drafted durable power of attorney can be drafted in a way that says, it is my desire that you continue those gifts while I am living. Now, some people may not be able to do that because, maybe your resources need to go to your care if you're incapacitated. I fully understand that. But if you are able to, and that's something that you want, because that's something that you care about, it's, part of your values and you want that to continue, you have to write that into that durable power of attorney in order to authorize that agent on that durable power of attorney to continue those gifts, or they will terminate during that time frame. Now, if you are a person who has a trust, and I will talk about the trust and why you need a trust here in a moment, but if you have a trust, you're also going to create it while you have capacity in that upper right-hand corner. And that trust, for every trust, there's a grantor, that's a creator of a trust. Every trust has a trustee. That's the person who's appointed by the grantor to manage the assets that are owned by the trust. We generally are going to want our assets. If we have a trust, we generally want our assets to be owned by the trust. And then there's a beneficiary, the person who gets to benefit from the assets that are in the trust. So when you're living up above in your revocable trust, your main trust, there's revocable and then there's irrevocable trust. Revocable trusts are usually your main trusts that are like your will. Irrevocable trust, there's a million tax planning strategies and gift planning strategies, charitable giving, irrevocable trusts that we're not going to delve into today. But right now we're just talking about our revocable trust. So for your revocable trust, you are the trustee while you're living. You are the a grantor and you're the beneficiary. So when you're living, you're managing your own money the same with your trust. But if you are going to fall below that line, you're incapacitated, you're not going to be the trustee. You're going to have a successor that you have appointed to take over to manage those assets. You're still the beneficiary, but they're going to manage those assets and keep those assets out of conservatorship as well, and manage those assets for your benefit during your incapacity. And again, with that document, you must, if you want to continue charitable giving, that trust must allow that in the instrument in order for that to continue, because the trust laws do not allow those gifts to continue unless they are allowed in the instrument. So it's very important to look at your trust documents and your durable power of attorney to see if they allow for charitable giving, if that is something that is important to you. So those two documents, what's the difference between a trust and a durable power of attorney? Well, first of all, generally, I like that person to be the same person. The trustee of a trust is the person who manages the assets that are owned by the trust. The agent on the durable power of attorney will manage the assets that are not owned by the trust. Which assets are owned by the trust and which are not is kind of beyond what we're going to talk about today, but that's basically the two documents taken together grant that one person that you appoint for those two positions all the powers they need in order to manage all of your finances. So that's kind of your incapacity planning 101. All right, we're going to drop on down to the bottom row and we're going to talk about death planning. So whether you're on the left side or on the right side, I think there's a big misconception that, oh, I have a trust, I don't need to do anything. I have an estate plan, I don't need to do anything. There's nothing I need to do. That's not true. Whenever somebody dies, whether you're on the left or the right, there's going to be an administration. What is an administration? It's a winding up of the affairs of a deceased person. That means that creditors, IRS, the world needs to be notified that this person has passed away. And basically you're saying to the world, if you have a claim, speak now or forever hold your peace. And as the administration goes forward, whoever's in charge has an obligation to make sure that those taxes are paid, those creditors are paid before anybody receives any money. Okay, that's going to happen whether you're on the left-hand side or on the right-hand side. The difference, at least in California, this is where there's big variations state by state on how horrible your probate is in your state. Ours is horrible in California. It is a long, lengthy, very, very, very expensive process. Probate, all it is court supervised administration of a deceased person's estate. So it's basically the administration is under court jurisdiction. They are monitoring the process and making sure that those who are entitled to get paid. It's extremely expensive in California. In California, the fees are based on the gross value of your estate. So if you have a $500,000 home, $499,000 mortgage on that home, the fees are still based on the $500,000, even though you've only got $1,000 of equity on that home. And the minimum fees are $26,000. Okay, that's not the case in every single. State, but you would have to check with your own jurisdiction. And the court decides who the executor is. We want to decide, don't we? We want to decide who's in charge. Your assets will be tied up in probate. Usually probate now with COVID and the delays in courts, I'm pretty confident that that's like everywhere in the United States, all our courts are backed up. It's taking at least a year to get through that process. And if you don't have any estate plan in place, the court's going to decide who gets your assets. Okay, there's an estate plan for you. It's called the intestate laws. Okay, but those laws may not be consistent with your wishes. Generally, those laws will say that if I did not put forth who is going to get my assets, it's probably going to go to my heirs. It's your spouse, maybe your children. If you have no spouse and children, it goes up to your parents and then down to your siblings. But if you were giving gifts during your life to someone who doesn't fall in that category, maybe you don't like those individuals, that plan isn't so great. And if you were charitably inclined and were hoping to continue to give gifts after post-death to those charities that you love, that's not going to happen if you don't have something put in place in order to ensure that those gifts continue. So how do we ensure that we give gifts to those who we intend to give them to? Well, you can use a trust or a will. Okay, both of those documents are used to just designate who's going to get our assets, okay? But the difference in California, at least, is that if you want to stay out of that probate process and you own a home, or if you own a home, or you have large assets where you cannot designate a beneficiary, you have to have a trust to avoid probate, okay? You have to have a trust to avoid probate in California if you own real estate. That is the number one thing. There's another process that I didn't write down here, but if you have minor children and you leave them money, they're going to end up in another court process called guardianship proceedings. So we want to make sure we stay out of that process as well. So a trust is the primary way. We want to give our gifts. If we're using a trust, you want to make sure that you've provided for those that you want to give gifts to. I see that I'm getting flagged on time, so I want to make sure that we move forward. But that's your primary distinction for those. If you have minor children, you own real estate, you need to have a trust in California in order to stay out of the court process. If you want asset protection for your children, if you want to give to charities, you need to make sure you outline those in your trust or your will. If we could switch pages, that would be great. Thank you, Catherine. All right, let's talk really quickly about taxes. All right, anytime we make a gift to someone, we potentially trigger a transfer tax. If we make a gift during life, it's a 40% tax, by the way. If we make a gift during life, it's called the gift tax. If we make a gift at death, it's called the estate tax. So gift and estate tax. And it's a 40% tax today, but that's probably going to change, except that we each have a credit. We have a credit of $11.7 million. If you died this year, you can give up to $11.7 million between life and death before that 40% tax kicks in. If I gave away $6 million during my life, I only have 5.7 left to give at death. That exemption is slated to come back down to its norm. Historically, it's been lower than the 11.7. It's looking to come back to between 3 and 5, which is closer to what it's been. And it's slated possibly to come back to 50 to 55% again, which is where it was in all years prior. So just keep that in mind. I'm telling you, it's 11.7 million per person if you're a married couple and if you passed away this year, it's a combined, it's 11.72 times. So, and then you can also give $15,000 gifts per person. So I'm going to switch slides again. So those are your general gifting rules. However, for gifts to charities, I'm going to, move on down. You can make gifts to charities and reduce your federal income gift and estate tax. And in those states where those states impose income or estate, they generally will also allow charitable deductions as well. One thing I want to say that is a reason why, but it shouldn't be your primary motivator. Saving on taxes shouldn't be your primary motivation to give. Most people, I have seen some where it works out great, but it should be a balance of, I care about these charities and why not take those charitable deductions. In some circumstances, I've seen people who are ready to sell an asset and they use that. Great, that's wonderful. But there has to be a balance and thought through, because I see sometimes a buyer's remorse if it's not thought through. So if we could go to the next page, please. All right, and so how much of a deduction, income tax deduction is allowed, very complex area of law. It depends on who's the donor, what type of charity, what kind of property, what form of gift are we giving, direct or whatever. All those things will dictate what is the amount of an income tax deduction you are allowed. For an estate tax deduction, generally it's unlimited. So I can give as much as I want to charity and it's all going to be estate tax free. So that's a beautiful time to think about giving to those charities we love. I've seen where someone will give the 11.7 and everything above that they're giving to their charity to avoid that tax. And I think that's a wonderful way to give. So those are just some of the reasons why we want to think about doing an estate plan and to ensure that our values and our charitable giving can continue. Now I'm going to switch over to Bill, who's going to talk a little bit more about how do we get there. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Esther. You did a great job at describing how charitable gift planning fits in with the overall estate planning. And my focus is, you can go ahead and change the slide. My focus is going to be on ways of supporting charitable organizations. So donors, their charitable giving can be reactive, or it can be strategic. And often we're trying to encourage donors to be more strategic so that it can leverage the impact of their charitable giving, and they're able to give more with greater impact. When conducting strategic charitable giving, there are a number of considerations, a number of factors that donors will need to consider. One, which charities do they want to support? Which assets do they want to use? What type of charitable vehicles will they implement? And when do they want to make that gift? And the timing of the giving can also inform the answers to the first three questions. So depending upon a donor's charitable goals, it's going to be helpful for them to decide whether they want to give now in a way that the charity can benefit now. They want to give now, but they can continue to enjoy the benefits of their assets, and then the charity can enjoy it and put it to use later, or whether to give later and the charity gets to use it later. So what are some of the reasons behind that? With giving now, whether, basically not right yet, basically, thank you, where you give now and the charity gets to use now, that's generally your outright gift. And it can be an outright gift of cash or any other type of assets, but you're transferring the asset and the charity is able to use it now. The donor may wish to have an immediate impact to respond to an urgent appeal. The donor, because of their finances, they may need or desire an immediate income tax deduction. They may want to use it as a family philanthropy tool. Or say, like with the gift of real estate, they may want to relieve themselves of administrative duties associated with managing the properties. Then also it gives them an ability to be a part of the solution today. So that's one reason why the outright giving, regardless of the asset, is important. For those donors who want to give now, but there's an analogy or metaphor where someone has a fruit tree and they live off of the fruit, but they may want to give the fruit tree to the charity now, but continue to have access to the fruit. But when they pass, the charities already have the tree and the fruit. So, in those particular cases, the donor may want to, demonstrate that the organization is valuable to them and they are committing to supporting the organization into the future, but they could use an immediate income tax deduction. They also may want to use this as a way to promote family philanthropy. It also helps them become part of that charity's family. They'll be, part of the charity's legacy society. In this area, this is a tool where they may be able to derive an income stream for themselves or for other people during their lifetimes. And then when those people pass, when the income beneficiaries pass, the remainder goes to the charity. Then also, what many of us are used to are the give later through a will or a trust, and the charity gets to use it later. So here, one of the main things is, I have the assets, but I'm really concerned about outliving my assets. So I'm going to keep my assets until the end of my lifetime. And then at that time, I can support the organizations I wish to support on a long-term basis. Many people will also use this as a family philanthropy tool, and it helps them provide for the organization's future sustainability. So we can go ahead and change the slide. So, we spoke briefly about outright giving. You give it now, the charity gets to use it now. That can be accomplished with cash. So cash can be reactive in nature, but it also can be strategic. This year, because of some recent legislation, if someone makes a donation of cash to a charitable organization, this year, unlike previous years, they are able to apply the income tax deduction, 100% of the income tax deduction against their current year's tax return. Normally, it's going to be a gift of cash is going to be subject to the AGI limitation rules that limit it up to 60% of one's adjusted gross income. This year, some donors are being very strategic, and instead of contributing cash or some other assets, they're being strategic and making gifts of cash so that they can use that 100% AGI ceiling now. More and more charities are really encouraging their donors to think more strategically and consider contributing gifts of appreciated assets, such as stock. And so stock gifts for a long time have been an important tool, but many charities are now really focusing on that, because when a donor makes a contribution of an appreciated stock, appreciated asset, that's an asset that has grown in value since they purchased it and has been held for over 1 year. When they do that, they're getting a double tax benefit when it allows them to leverage the impact of their giving. Because normally, if they had a stock and they sold the stock to raise funds for their charitable giving, they would incur capital gains liability on that. So what would be left after they paid off that capital gains liability is going to be an amount smaller than the fair market value of the stock. When they contribute that appreciated stock to a charity, and then because the charities are tax exempt, when that asset is sold by the charity, it doesn't incur the capital gains liability. So therefore, as a donor, you're going to be able to have a greater impact by directly contributing appreciated stock. So there's publicly traded stock, and then you can also contribute assets of business interests of closely held stock as well. And the same concepts are in place. Many donors are now, particularly here in California, where the value of real estate skyrocketed, many of them no longer need some of that real estate, and so they're using real estate to support the charities. You can use life. You can make a gift today, and you can purchase an insurance policy and make the charity the owner, and you just continue to make the premium payments on that. In addition, so normally, I'm moving to gifts of IRA. So normally with using retirement benefits, for most of us, our largest asset are our retirement plans. However, it's usually not a great tool for charitable contributions, because normally you would have to remove the assets from the IRA, recognize the income, and pay the income tax, and then what's available to support the charity is a lesser amount. However, because of some fairly recent legislation, we now have the ability, donors have the ability to do what's called a qualified charitable distribution, which allows them to direct their IRA provider to make a transfer directly to the charities that they want to support, up to $100,000. The benefit of that is that there are some donors who are now in that age range in which they must take a required minimum distribution. They can use this to avoid having to recognize that income that could possibly push them up into a higher tax bracket, but they're able to use this method to direct a qualified charitable distribution from their IRA to a charity. They don't have to recognize the income. The charity gets the full value of what they wanted to support, and the donor also gets to fulfill, in part or in its entirety, their required minimum distribution. Another way you can support charities now, is create a type of fund. You make a gift to a charity that then grants funds to other charities. And that generally falls into to creating a private foundation or creating a donor advised fund. And both of those are grant making entities, and there are going to be different reasons why you might opt for one over the other. But these are going to be tools that will allow you to be also to be strategic on granting out, making grants to other organizations. The last thing is what's called a charitable lead trust, and that is going to be a split interest trust. So essentially, as a donor, you transfer your assets into a trust, and that trust is crafted so that it will support on an annual basis. It will provide payments to charities. It can start immediately, but it's basically supporting it during your lifetime or for a set period of time. And then at the end of your lifetime or at the end of that period, the remaining trust assets will be passed back to your family or to a non-charitable entity, a non-charitable person. So those are ways in which you can be strategic about supporting charities now, giving now, and that the charities can use now. If we can go to the next slide. So the next slide addresses the type of gifts that you could give now, but the charity won't be able to really use those assets until later. And those are basically two other split interest gifts. One is called a charitable gift annuity, and another one is a charitable remainder trust. With a charitable gift annuity, it's a contract between an charitable organization and the donor. And basically the charity says, in exchange for your asset, we promise to pay you a set amount along the frequency that we've determined at the beginning of the gift. And you will receive this for your entire lifetime or for the set period, regardless of what happens in the market. And so this is a charitable gift vehicle that is very important for, can be very important for donors, generally 76, 77 and older, because it provides them with an income stream and the stability that they can count on for their lifetime. A charitable remainder trust, on the other hand, is basically you're transferring an asset into the trust. The trustee is required to make payments based upon either a set percentage or a set payout amount. But often with a charitable remainder trust, the balance of the trust and the payouts are going to be dependent upon what happens in the market. But this is also a tool that allows donors to derive a stream of income either for themselves or for others. But then they know that when they pass or at the end of the trust term, that the organization will already have those assets in hand. So this is a way that donors are able to become part of the family, the charity's family, demonstrate that they are in for the long haul to provide for the charity's future sustainability. Let's go to the next slide, please. And then here's one where many of us are more familiar: bequests, right? The gifts that we give later and that the organization obviously won't be able to use until later. So you can provide for that by a gift of leaving gifts, thank you, by leaving gifts in your will, your trust. There's also something called a life estate. That's basically where you make a contribution of your real estate, but you get to live in it during your lifetime, and then the organization gets to use it once you're gone. You can, then some of the easiest and options for donors is to just use beneficiary designations, making a charity a beneficiary of your life insurance or your IRA and retirement plans. And it's very easy. You don't even have to go to an attorney to do that. You can go onto your computer and just type it in online and get that established. So those are ways in which you can be strategic, and you can also think about how you want to, the timing of how you want to approach supporting the organizations that you value. And the final slide just addresses how community foundations can partner with you and your charities to help you. So some charities are, because they are really focusing on achieving their charitable goal, they don't have the internal expertise to handle gifts of appreciated, like real estate or closely held assets. community foundations can work with them to help them provide them with the tools and the charitable vehicles that they can't offer you as a donor on your own, but we can work with them to achieve your goals and to support them. So I believe we're coming up close to time, and we wanted to at least leave a few minutes for some questions.
Yeah, no, thank you, Esther, and thank you, Bill. I mean, this is just such a interesting, complex topic. I mean, and Esther really explaining to us why it's really important for us to start even at the year 18 years of age and beyond, was really fascinating. And it really just shows the importance of ensuring that you have a dialogue with your family, your spouse, your partner, and really be open and transparent about those things. And Bill, thanks for kind of walking us through the vehicles. And I really like the way that you put it together: give now, and the charity benefits now, or give now and the charity benefits later, or give later and the charity benefits later. I mean, I hope all of our guests on the line today really found this helpful and useful kind of brief. I mean, and just again, would encourage everyone to kind of take this and keep it in mind, consult your own attorneys and tax advisors. And we also have both Esther and Bill's contact information if you're interested in having additional conversations with them. And always, thank you so much for your support of International Medical Corps. As I've said before, we couldn't do our work without you. And we just hope that you will continue to keep International Medical Corps in your list of charitable priorities. And if you are interested in including International Medical Corps in your estate plans, please do let us know, and we'll continue to provide ways that you can reach out to us and learn more about how to do that. So just thank you all so much for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you, Esther. Thank you, Bill. And we'll make this recording available for you as well, and for people who weren't able to attend, but we look forward to continuing this dialogue. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.